Welcome to Engage, a Genetec podcast.
I created electronic gadgets. Hey, I'm not a security person. And all of a sudden, here I am in the center of the security industry.
The physical security industry has come a long way in the past couple of decades. But with the development of more advanced threats, industry leaders must identify risks and adapt products to stay relevant and thrive. In a special edition of Engage, we'll talk with two career innovators in the physical security space. Martin Gren, board chair of Access Communications, and Pierre Racz, president of Genetec.
All I can say is that you're going to have to pry my keyboard from my cold, dead hands.
Later in the episode, we will deep dive into where the technology is going and find out what Martin and Pierre expect in an ever-changing industry. But first, where did it all start? We'll look back at the origin stories of these two pioneering enterprises. We'll look at their early bets, challenges, and the eureka moments along the way. What was the road Pierre took to build Genetec, a global leader in physical security? And what led Martin from the business of print servers to the creation of network cameras as we see them today? I'm David Chauvin. People like Martin and Pierre provide future leaders with a unique look into the origins of today's physical security space and how technology can play a role in shaping an industry. I started our conversation by asking Martin and Pierre about their experiences pushing the envelope.
So I want to start with a bit of going back in the past and exploring the stories and seeing how we got here in the first place. You both have played pivotal roles in the progress of our industry. And, let's be honest, our industry is, to say the least, technologically conservative in a lot of different ways. And yet you've pushed the barrier of what's possible in the industry for, over 2 decades now, each of you. If you look back to where you were 20, 25 years ago, are you surprised at the amount of progress that you've been able to push in this industry? Martin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, as you know, Access, we were founded back in 1984, long before IP video.
Correct.
And we were founded on a business model of always using resellers and being the best friend of a reseller. And we had a mantra of connecting anything to the network. So back in 1995, me and a colleague, we got the idea to connect a camera to the network. So by doing that, in 1996, we actually created the world's first network camera. And we made some market studies, and we found the market to be all analog. And we said to ourselves that either this is something we don't understand, and the market is going to remain analog for the rest of our lives, or we're actually into something big. So we looked into that, and we decided to basically risk the whole company by investing in the first generation of our first chipset. So we created the chip, the first ARPEC, and that gave us the first modern network camera back in 1999 with embedded Linux. And that is the role model of all network cameras today.
And what happened to that print server business?
The print server business kept on growing until 2001, when it started to decline at about the same pace as the camera was growing. So it looked like the company revenues was flat, but in reality we had a high growth in the camera business. And we actually, in the end, we sold it. And can you imagine who bought it? Well, we sold it to Canon, of course.
So obviously you look at the industry today and you can't be that surprised of where it went and how much it evolved. That was your initial bet 25 plus years ago. Is there anything that really surprises you, though, in terms of the path that our industry took during those 25 years?
Well, obviously we realized when we did some market studies that, our main enemy, initially at least, was the incumbents, and like Pelco in particular. So we looked at the good sides of telco and the bad sides and tried to be better than them in many aspects, and still maintaining our business model, because that has always been our secret sauce and key to success.
And so you mentioned this idea of the camera. Why security camera?
Well, we could connect anything to the network, and the camera was just a coincidence. We more or less we did it because we could, but we had a strong culture on looking on the market and understanding how to do business on it. And one of the historical moments for myself, that was sometime in around 2005 when I realized, hey, I'm in the security industry. Because I never saw myself as a security person. I created electronic gadgets. Hey, I'm not a security person. And all of a sudden, here I am in the center of the security industry.
And as we know, the security industry, you never leave once you're in.
That's it.
It sucks you in. And Pierre, what about you? So again, if you go back to the original idea and the original seed, obviously you expected the industry to become what it is today, or did you envision it to be different from what it is?
It was a series of accidents that sort of brought Genetec into the video space and the security industry. Certainly during the 80s when I was doing my graduate engineering work, I was actually working in analog bipolar transistors, making high-speed filters, Nyquist filters, get this, for video codecs. I was working with other people that were making the digital part of it, and I was doing the analog front end for video codecs at Nortel Research. I never thought that I'd wind up in doing this more for the rest of my life, but the biggest surprises for me were the difficulties in convincing people of some things that are basic staples of the architecture today. The first thing was that the network architecture in the 90s, people were using T1 lines and other telecom lines, or at least the people I was working with were making the codec, and I could not convince them that it was point to multipoint. It was multicast was the way to go. And basically it's when we decided to do it on our own, we said, the heck with this, we're going to do it on an IP network, which we then bought off-the-shelf H.261 encoder decoder cards from Osprey. These were for teleconferencing. And Omnicast 1.0, this is circa 1996, it was an industrial computer that had 4 full-length cards for the video codec for each channel. And essentially for about $50,000 we could do 4 channels. Amazingly, we actually managed to sell some of these to some industrial sites, but not enough to make this thing work. I think the exciting, or the luck that we had, is that we met another little Montreal company called SmartSight. They were building a codec, and they wanted to use this to transmit it on wireless, but they knew that they needed a control protocol, so they actually tried to create this open architecture group so that someone would design a control system for their cameras. And we discovered them by chance because we were trying to do a project for the Port of Quebec. And then when they found out what we were doing, they showed us their proposed architecture, and we said, well, that's what we've implemented. And so that's when we integrated their equipment. That is how Omnicast 2 started. When 9/11 unfortunately came, people did want to send video over the networks, and they did want to have point-to-multipoint architecture because they wanted to share video. So one of our driving projects was for a large gas utility that wanted to have control rooms on either side of the St. Lawrence for security reasons. And running telecom lines was just way too expensive. And I guess the rest is history. But there's many things that we had that we were surprised at the resistance. We were surprised when we made our SDK for access control that the access control companies wouldn't use our SDK to put multimedia in their access control systems. It turns out it was easier for us to receive events from access control system than for us to send them video. Then The next big thing that we encountered or were surprised was the initial reluctance to go to the cloud, and now it's all the rage. So I guess that my whole adventure in video was a series of people that were hard to convince to do the right thing that we're doing today, but we were persistent, and here we are.
And so again, if we go back to the first few years, going back to that time and thinking, what was your vision of the industry? Is there a significant gap between what you had thought then and where we are today?
Well, I mean, IP video has created a lot of new applications which just wasn't possible with the analog technology. I mean, I think in general that goes for like critical infrastructure, like city surveillance, and to some extent one could say that we're following Moore's law, which is the driving force for our industry. I mean, back when I started Axis back in 1984, my vision was really that I loved building cool gadgets and sell them, and I wanted to sell them in volume to have a lot of happy users. That vision for me, I mean, I think we succeeded quite well because there are so many happy users using our cameras all around the world. I mean, wherever I go, I can see Axis cameras. And actually, many of them are also Genetec powered, which is really nice as well.
And what about you, Pierre?
The driving idea behind Genetec actually was in the 90s was to write and promote object-oriented software, and the application itself wasn't as important as the way we built the application. One of the things that was very clear to me, I was convinced that multicast was going to be the way that we were going to communicate. And we said, well, in 3 or 4 more cycles, the computing power will have caught up, and the quality of the video is going to be acceptable, and we're going to get rid of this analog low-pass filter that is NTSC, or PAL. I underestimated how quickly that would occur. I thought that by 2005 that would be all digital cameras, but that didn't occur until at least 2012, I think is when we crossed that threshold. So there's some things I saw, some things I didn't. I also didn't think that Genetec would grow to the size it has. There's people that have famous quotes that I said, never will Genetec be more than 50 people. And then we hit 50 people. I said, never will it be more than 100 people. And then when we hit 100 people, I stopped saying that because I knew I was going to be wrong.
And today we're at?
We're at 1,600 people.
And so, Martin, for you, when was that moment where you stopped counting? When you said, okay, this is really taking off?
Oh, for me, it was probably when we were like 50. We had our first building and we had a large warehouse operation. And I just say, wow, this is amazing. And we just kept growing. And I mean, nowadays, I feel more at home when I visit our subsidiaries. And actually, if I visit Boston, it's a huge office there as well. Now I feel at home in the regional offices because they are smaller.
And so after all these years, you're still, either, Pierre, you're the CEO of Genetec, you're both at the head of the companies. What drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, I love this industry. I have my passion for my cool electronic products, and I love all the people and the partners that we have gotten to know and work with. I mean, I can travel wherever in the world I want, and I meet people just like the people here in Lund or in South Africa or Japan. And it's like a one big great family. And that actually includes partners. That definitely includes the Genetec people, because we work so often together.
And what about you, Pierre?
The people also is really part of it. I don't miss the airplanes, but I actually miss being there and the dinners and the discussion. And, the other part of the answer is why are we still around? It reminds me of a talk that Dr. Marvin Minsky gave at the Edge Institute. And he was talking about, he would ask people, would you want to live forever? And most people would say, well, no. And because why? Because I'll be old and creaky. And he says, well, what if we could reset your clock to half the age today? And they said, no, because I'd get bored. But for scientists, it's different because I have a whole bunch of problems that will require a century or two to solve.
Though our guests Pierre and Martin may not have a century to answer all of my questions, in the second half of this special edition of Engage, we talk to them about what they see coming.
Things have certainly changed around here. I remember when this was all farmland as far as the eye could see.
Like inventor Dr. Emmett Brown in the 1985 classic movie Back to the Future, Pierre and Martin's revolutionary ideas have shaped our industry over the last 25 years. The future may be hard to predict, but in this second half of our show, we ask Pierre and Martin what lies ahead for them and for our industry. I started by asking about a topic that is on all of our minds: cybersecurity.
We know that our industry is again somewhat conservative. So Martin, how do you see the challenge of cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, my first cybersecurity incident that happened back in 1996, actually the same year we did the first camera, and that was our print servers we had supplied to an Opel factory in Germany. So our product print service actually brought the whole factory down. So of course, when we did the first network camera, we had to apply the same rules as the print server, and we tested it just like a print server, not as a camera. So reliability was the key. And that's how we built the cameras, for reliability. And to be honest, not for the best picture quality. But that was the route. And today, of course, we have all these problems with customers with old versions of the VMS and using old cameras for a long time. But the trick is obviously to have them connected to a good VMS that can manage the cameras. And of course, you should apply all the good policies from the hardening guide in terms of upgrading to the LTS firmware, which means the long-term support firmware.
And so between the cameras providing the tools, so bulk updates and firmware upgrades, and the VMS managing those devices, Pierre, do you feel like not just Genetec and Access, but do you feel like our industry in general is actually doing enough to counter some of the cybersecurity concerns that are now part of our everyday lives?
You know, I'm thinking back that one of the lucky things that Genetec had is that at the beginning of Genetec, we were always involved with the early adopters. Before it got mainstream, and the early adopters were quicker to apply upgrades and patches. And then as the cameras became more mainstream, we were brought kicking and screaming into physical security to get the people to understand how to deal with the problem. So look, the strategy is a short-term containment, and then there's a long-term education strategy. We're trying to educate the customers on the importance of doing this. So what annoys me about the cybersecurity, it's a distraction for us to do other cool things, but I guess it's a necessary evil. How will the future evolve? Well, I think that a good analogy is the human immune system. And the way our immune system works is that the viruses or bacteria do get in. More often than not, they're intercepted before they can do too much damage and are kicked out. And our computer networks have to be designed the same way, where it's compartmentalized enough so that when they do find a way in, we quickly detect them, contain them, and then turf them out. And so I guess this is the reality today. When I started with computers, there was no security. It was all university, it was all cooperative, and nobody had malicious intent. Unfortunately, that world does not exist anymore.
Do you think our industry is ready in the face of increasing attacks? Do you think that people are educated enough to understand the everyday threat, or do you feel like our industry in general is still a bit behind where it could be?
I don't think that there's one answer to that, right? There's degrees of maturity. I think that part of the problem is, in general, cyber is abstract to people that don't have a software or scientific background, and so they don't understand exactly the nature of the threat and how easy it is. And also people don't understand how information that they might not think is valuable can be very valuable in the wrong hands. Even the Wall Street Journal talked about that. They said that by 2024 that the Security and Exchange Commission would start using some of the provisions that they have in different regulations to hold the C-suite personally responsible for cyber negligence.
What do you think are the big topics coming up and that are going to have a serious impact on the industry over the next decade or so?
I think, as we mature on resolution, there are always applications that strive for more resolution, but image usability is something that we've been preaching for a long time. Sometimes when it's really dark, having a super high resolution doesn't help you. You actually want a good compromise. You get big enough pixels, you actually see what's going on with clarity. And it's very different when you optimize for still photography, when you want to have a pleasure format of image quality, versus for security, where it doesn't need to look beautiful, but you really have to see the details. Mm-hmm. And there's still so much more we can do on the image quality. So I see an enormous evolution there ahead of us. We also see better connectivity. I hope one day we will get rid of the passwords, for instance. We will see more integration of other IoT gear. We have created IP audio, which is probably 20 years behind IP video. Just look on microphones or speakers. They're almost all analog today. We have done the video door stations, which is an integrated part of a security system, a horn speaker, because if you see something bad going on, you actually want to deter and, hey, go away. Most people go away when they know that someone is watching them. And then we have all the big thing about AI, but I don't think we're going to dwell about that here. I know Pierre and we have a very common view on AI and how it should be used.
And so Pierre, in terms of new technology, 5G's been, on the lips of people across industries for at least 5 years as a real game changer, right? Do you think 5G will actually have a material impact on our industry, or do you think it's only going to be left for fringe application?
No, it's going to have a big impact, but it's not going to be what most people think. I don't think it is going to be so much the higher bandwidth that is available, but I think that what is going to be really the big changer is going to be the lower latency. Now, as soon as we solve one problem, our users come back to say, well, I have two more that I'd like you to address. So we're certainly things that Martin and I are going to be working on is maybe not transmitting more pixels, but capturing more pixels and then finding some way to either store them or figure out which of the higher resolution pixels are of interest to the end user for a given application. And 5G is just going to give us a different way of doing this, and then we'll be able to address problems that we have not yet imagined.
Yeah, we have access. Given Moore's law is always working for us, and we are a hardware company. So, we are obviously putting more and more chip real estate to be used for applications. We launched some 10 years ago the first camera platform, which is now the industry standard for running stuff on a camera. We now have deep learning modules coming out on more and more cameras. And just knowing Moore's law, you can obviously extrapolate where it's going to be. And I hope to see a lot of Genetec applications also running here.
And so we'll pivot now to the last part of the show. We have a couple of questions. The first one comes from René Michel Paquet. His question is around privacy. He says, or he asks, when it comes to aligning with the world's toughest privacy and security standards, whose job is it? Will camera manufacturers like Axis be forced to improve their security stance? Or is it on companies like Genetec to improve the situation from a software perspective? And how possible is it for our industry to become secure, considering firmware in general is notoriously old and insecure? Martin, what are your thoughts?
Well, we have the benefit of living in a GDPR country here in Sweden. So we've obviously been playing with GDPR for quite some time now. And we have implemented stuff like privacy shields and so on embedded to our cameras. In general, I think GDPR is on what you store and how you retrieve. So I would say that the vast majority of GDPR issues actually rely on the VMS. So it's not to such a large extent applicable to the camera. But the cameras can, for instance, do the trickling on recording on the SD card, and then the camera becomes sort of a midget type of VMS. And then, of course, the GDPR rules also apply to the cameras.
Pierre, do you agree?
When I was in university, the physics department had this wonderful T-shirt, and it read, "Fighting entropy is everybody's business." I think that this lack of privacy is tantamount to chaos, and so it's everybody's responsibility. So, of course, we rely on the camera manufacturers, and we work closely with Axis for these things so that, for example, we can establish a high level of assurance of the identity of the camera, the identity of the firmware that's running on the camera. Of course, we can't do that if our end users are just dumping the problem on us. They have to delegate part of the problem to us, but they also have to play their part in addressing the problem. We will teach them as much as we can about what we know, but unless they have decided to do something on their own, there's not much that we can, there's only so much that we can do.
Last question from Jermaine Santoya. And Jermaine asks, blockchain is an area of interest and carries some interesting implications for authentication. Do either organization, Axis or Genetec, have any plans to focus on these technologies? And I'll start with you, Martin.
Well, for the time being, we are, of course, we are following that in our new concepts team, but so far we have not seen an application for blockchains in cameras.
And Pierre?
We've been doing blockchain for at least 4 years now. Now, it's not the cryptocurrency blockchains, but it still is a distributed ledger. So our users that use clearance to store their evidence, they're actually on a blockchain. And our blockchain is different from the cryptocurrency blockchain because our blockchain is highly authenticated versus the cryptocurrency blockchains their goal is to be highly anonymous. What this does is it really simplifies the consensus algorithm for us, and so it makes it a lot easier for us to achieve this secure but distributed record system. So, if you want to securely share multimedia information with other organizations or other parts of your organization and have a high level of confidence that you can do so and still remain compliant with GDPR and what other follow-up legislation is going to come, well, blockchain is the way to fly. And that's why we've invested so much in blockchain. And you'll see in not too distant future that all of the records that are used to manage Genetec VMS system are going to be stored in the blockchain.
Well, thank you so much for being with me today. You're both titans of the industry. You have great stories of how you got here. You have a great outlook on the future, and I think we all know you'll both be around for quite some time. So it was really fun to pick your brain on your thoughts on the industry and where we're going. Any last words for the audience before we end this conversation? Martin, I'll start with you.
Well, I appreciate being invited here, and I just love our cooperation with Genetec. It's been super fruitful in the past, and I'm pretty sure it's going to remain as cooperative as it always has been.
Absolutely. And Pierre, any last words?
Oh, we've been very good at not telling the naughty things that we're coming up with together, but all I can say is that you're going to have to pry my keyboard from my cold, dead hands.
Fantastic. Martin, Pierre, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm David Chauvin. See you next time on Engage.
Engage, a Genetec podcast, is a production of Genetec Incorporated. The views expressed by the guests are not necessarily those of Genetec, its partners, or customers. For more episodes, visit our website at www.genetec.com, on your favorite podcasting app, or ask your smart speaker to play Engage, a Genetec podcast.